You must have had a lot of special interests who were unhappy with this, and you had to get things through the legislature. How did you organize that, and how did you prevail?
Well, I must say I'm fortunate enough that the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate at state level have been extremely supportive. But bottom line here is that we open up our books and we said, this is the truth, this is what we're faced with. They are both Republicans as well. So they understood that we were doing the right thing. And they understood that if we wanted to lower taxes in the first term, which we're going to be doing year 2, we had to cut expenses and bring back our government to a proper size.
So did that involve having to give up on a number of programs, or having to shrink a number of bureaucracies, or how did you do that?
Well, certainly we needed to. Actually, we even had to lay off 16,000 public employees. But then again, for example, I'll give you an example. A lot of services were being provided manually. We opened up e-government type of service to obtain some certificates and documents that you needed, and you print them at home now. And you don't need anyone to handle that. And we're saving, hundreds of millions of dollars by doing it that way.
Now, as this develops, what is the popular reaction? I mean, what do the polls tell you about how the people of Puerto Rico are responding to this?
It's interesting. People don't necessarily like everything we've done, but they at the same time say it's the right thing to do. So they realize that now we're going to be able to lower taxes. And once we start lowering taxes, because there's a natural distrust of government, and I understand why. Because government normally will not keep up its promises. Our commitments will be met. And when that's starting to happen, people realize we mean business. And that's why they say, I don't like exactly everything that has happened, but it's the right thing to do. And that's the answer we're getting from most people.
Now, in parallel to everything you've done to get the state government back on track, you've also been a real leader in looking at having a referendum in Puerto Rico on the status of the island. Could you share with us what your thinking is, what the status of it is now, and what your hopes are?
Sure. We've been a territory since 1898. We've been American citizens. I'm proud of to be American citizens since 1917, and fought in every single war since 1917 with valor, in greater numbers proportionally speaking than 49 of the 50 states. So we really have contributed to this country more than one way. What we're asking Congress is to provide for a process that will actually allow us to vote directly and express to Congress what our status preference would be. I have my own preferences, but I want our constituents to express that. It will be the first time back in the 90s when you were Speaker, there was an intent to do that. It didn't go through on the Senate side. This time around, it went through the House with bipartisan support, and with a 54-vote margin. It's before the Senate as we speak. And again, it's non-binding, but all it does is it will ask the question as to what is your status preference. Regardless of what the result is, we will have to come back to Congress and start again in looking at perhaps legislation to implement and that result, and actually ask the question again as to, because we need a mandate on whatever the end result may be. But that's how every single territory did it before they became states.
So one of the big questions people ask me, because as you know, I've been very supportive of having a referendum. And I think that the people of Puerto Rico actually in the long run have an obligation to decide who they really want to be in the long run, because I don't think we as a country can continue to run a commonwealth that is not quite America but is America and runs all sorts of United Nations problems eventually. From your perspective, one of the big challenges I get from some people is the question of English. If English is the language of the U.S. government, what does that mean if Puerto Rico then becomes a state? And what's your sense as you look at that long-term process?
English has been one of our two official languages since 1902. It is a law that all children must be taught in both languages and must learn both languages. We polled this issue. 95% of parents in Puerto Rico want their children to learn and be totally fluent in English and learn English as anybody else would in the 50 states. This should not be an issue. Today, even today as a territory, if you want to file documents in the state government in English, you can do so. If you want to file them in Spanish, you can do so as well. But English is the language of opportunity, and we all understand that. And all of us as parents want our children to be totally fluent in English, and that is an aspiration that every single parent has in Puerto Rico.
You know, Republicans at times seem uncertain as to how to reach out and how to have the kind of opportunities that we should have, dealing with many Latinos who are very religious in background, very work ethic oriented, very pro-family. I mean, all the values things you would think this should be a no-brainer. What would your advice be to the national Republicans, both as they think about Puerto Rico, but also as they think about having an effective ability to work in the Latino community across the whole country?
The late President Reagan said that Latinos are Republicans, they just don't know it. And he was so right. Actually, I started in the Republican Party as a student in D.C., stuffing envelopes in his campaign. So that he brought us, many of us, into the party. And the bottom line here is that we're socially conservative, fiscally conservative. We have a natural distrust of government. And we want lower taxes. We want education is key to us. And we want our small and medium-sized businesses to flourish. Those are Republican values. So we don't have to run away from our values and our principles. On the contrary, we have to underscore them. But we also need to embrace that community. And the tenor that is used in the public discourse, especially on some issues like immigration, has to be tamed. We can say the same things in many different ways. And the tenor being used by some of our colleagues pushes away the Hispanic community. Instead of pushing them away, we need to embrace them.